Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we are going to talk about a philosophical question, one that came in that also deals with foreign policy and the way things feel like they should be, and whether or not that's really the way they are if you apply a philosophical filter to it. This has to do with people wanting to leave Russia, people trying to get out of conscription over there. I know from past videos you don't support a draft on principle and philosophy. I, too, think it's unconscionable for somebody nowhere near the fighting to say, you pick up a gun and go fight for the state. Entitled rich people, not the term here, sending poor people off without their consent to war for their personal betterment is horrific. But I can't agree with just letting the Russians leave. Some of these people had Z decals on their cars when they tried to leave. If they're forced to stay and deal with the consequences, they'll have to change their views. If things get bad enough, even if they're not people who would fight today, won't they reach a point where they've suffered enough, then they'll fight against Putin? I listened to what you said about the strategic value of letting them leave and admit it makes sense, but philosophically, shouldn't they have to clean up their own mess? There's a lot in that. So let's start with this. How is a draft enforced? How do they make people go along with a draft? There's a penalty, right? And whatever that penalty is, it's worse than, the possibilities of what could happen to you in a war. That's why a draft functions. Because there is a penalty. Sometimes it's a social penalty. Sometimes it's a criminal one. Sometimes it's both. But there's a penalty. So you either do what they say or you deal with the consequences of it. Right? Your message here, I agree with a whole lot of it. It's unconscionable for somebody nowhere near the fighting to say, you pick up a gun and go fight for the state. Does it become more conscionable if it's you pick up a gun and go fight for what I think you should fight for? It doesn't change a whole lot. Just the mechanism of whether or not it's somebody's personal belief or a government entity. That's all that's changing. If things get bad enough, even if they're not people who would fight today, won't they reach a point where they've suffered enough, then they'll fight against Putin? It's a draft from the other side, isn't it? From a purely philosophical point of view, I would still say allow them to leave. And I mean, from a purely philosophical point of view, I think we should be trying to help those without means leave and get away from it. Not put them in a situation where they have to suffer or fight. Because that's the same mechanism that pushes people to go to war when they don't want to. Again, this is one of those moments where you're right. The support of the upper middle class in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Yeah, I mean that is, it's integral to the war effort. It really is. And they did cause it. Their support for it, their consent to it, they allowed Putin to make those moves on some level. I agree. I get it. At the same time, that's true in any country that engages in something like this. What do you think would have happened in 2003 in the United States to all of those yellow ribbons that were on trucks if suddenly they were going to draft people and send them to Iraq? I bet a lot of them would have gotten pulled off. It's not that different. And the reality is them leaving is them withdrawing their support. And it will be something that helps end internal support for the war, which does help clean up the mess. They may not be doing it for those reasons. They're probably not. It's probably all very self-serving. But when you're talking about people's lives, and not just theirs, I mean, understand, yes, the Ukrainian military is battle-hardened. And Russian conscripts are not going to do well against them. But they're also not going to not fight back. I mean, there are Ukrainian lives at stake with this as well. I would suggest that both philosophically, through a foreign policy lens, through every lens except for vengeance, the right move is to help those who want to avoid conscription avoid it. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.